All right, it's time to talk about some of these conference championship games that are coming up this weekend. Of course, we got a bunch of them on Friday and then all day Saturday. All four of the Power Four conference championship games are on Saturday. But in today's video, I want to talk about one of the games on Friday. We're going to talk about Tulane and North Texas. And then I'm going to talk about the ACC championship game on Saturday, Virginia versus Duke, and the Big Ten championship game also on Saturday, Indiana versus Ohio State. And I'm going to talk about them in that order in case you want to fast forward to one of those three games. It'll be North Texas, Tulane first, then Virginia, Duke. We'll finish it up with the Big Ten. I'll do a second prediction video where we talk about the SEC and the Big 12. This would be too long if I tried to get them all into one video. You know I'm long-winded too. Can't help it. Let's start with North Texas and Tulane. This is an 11-1 North Texas team. Looked pretty good. Their offense has been really fun to watch this year. Their only loss came at home about halfway through the season to South Florida, who at the time we all thought was the best group of five team in the country. Second half of the season didn't go as well for South Florida as the first half, and they sort of played themselves out of this game. But they did beat this North Texas team on the road in North Texas in a track meet type of game where almost 100 points were scored. So that was North Texas' only loss. For Tulane, they caught two losses, only one conference loss. It came on the road at UTSA. They lost 48-26. Their second loss was against Power 4 opponent and playoff team Ole Miss on the road in Oxford early in this season, first month of the season. And of course, the winner of this game is almost guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff. It's stuff, the five highest ranked conference champions automatically qualify for the playoffs. And it's hard to imagine a scenario unfolding where the winner of this North Texas Tulane game isn't one of the five highest rated conference champions, probably going to end up being the fourth highest ranked conference champion when it's all said and done. But I think this is going to be a really, really good game here. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored. It's a weird situation here. Both of these coaches have taken different jobs. Tulane head coach Pat Summerall, of course, has taken Pat Summerall. He's an old broadcaster. John Summerall has taken the head coaching job at Florida, and Eric Morris at North Texas has taken the job at Oklahoma State. But both coaches are coaching these two teams through their playoff run. At least that's what's been announced, and that's what the plan is so far. Now, one of these teams' seasons will likely come to an end after this game with a loss. At least they won't be involved in the playoffs. So one of those teams will get their new coaches next week. The other one, I guess, is going to stick around for whatever playoff run the winner goes on. But this is going to be a good game, an entertaining game. These two teams did not play during the regular season. The line on this game is low too, so they're expecting it to be a pretty good game. It's about 2.5 or 3 points, depending on where you look. North Texas is actually favored, and I agree with that. I don't watch a ton of group of five games every year as the season goes along. I try to watch a couple of group of five games involving what looks like are going to be the potential playoff teams at the end of the year. So I at least have a base level of knowledge about what these teams are like. And both of these teams have been fun to watch. I've watched each of these teams a couple of times. I watched both these teams lose. I've watched Tulane and Ole Miss. I also watched the North Texas South Florida game. That game was on during the week, if I remember right, a Friday night maybe. Could have been a Thursday or Friday. It was a very entertaining game. I think North Texas is going to get the win here. Both really well coached. Don't make a lot of penalties. Don't beat themselves. Sort of the typical talking points you hear a lot of times about teams that aren't maybe as talented as some of the top five teams in the country, but play really well week in and week out. Are like, oh, what are coached well, and they don't make a lot of. Well, they don't. I mean, that's one of the ways you get to where these two teams are without having a roster full of 4- and 5-star players. So it sounds like kind of just a talking point, but I think in this case it's true. But I think North Texas is going to win this game. I think it's going to be high scoring. The over-under is 67.5, so they're expecting both teams to score 30-plus points in this one. Could be a last team with the ball wins type of situation. Think sort of Big 12 from the late 2010s. You had a lot of games that were 38-35, 42-40, 45-38, things like that. That's kind of what I'm expecting here. Based on the numbers, that's what Vegas is expecting too. I think this is going to be an extremely entertaining game. If you're sitting around Friday night looking for something to do, this is a college football game worth watching. Obviously, with the winner going to the playoffs, there's some added sort of juice with this game here, even though it is a G5 game. I know a lot of people don't watch a lot of those games. And because it's on Friday, you can watch this game without having to miss any of the Power Conference Championship games, which are all 4 being played the next day on Saturday. But give me North Texas here to win this one. I think they punched their ticket to the playoffs and send Tulane to what will still be a pretty good bowl game for Tulane. Moving on to the ACC with Virginia versus Duke. Now, before I talk any more about this game, this comes up a lot now because you got a lot more. You have rematches happening in college football now, a lot more than what we're used to. There's a couple of points on that. Number one, there's a lot of college football fans that don't like rematches. And I think it's because we're used to not seeing them in college football. For a long time, you just never saw rematches. You played the teams in your conference, the season ended, and then you played a bowl game against a team from another conference. There was very little, if any, opportunity for rematches at all for the majority of the 100-plus history of college football. Well, then conferences went to divisions and conference championship games, and while it was still extremely rare, every once in a while you would see a rematch in a conference championship game. Now with the 12-team playoff, it's going to almost be a yearly occurrence. You're almost guaranteed to see some type of rematch at some point in the postseason now, whether it's conference championship games, you've got, of course, conference expansion has happened, or whether it happens in the 12-team playoff. Just look at the teams that are projected to make the playoffs right now. A lot of those teams played each other during the season, so the chance at least exists every single year that you're going to see rematches a lot more. So I think as college football fans, we have to sort of open our heads a little bit more to the idea of seeing rematches. Rematches are something that happen in almost every single sport across the country, really for a long time, with the exception of college football, right? Whether you're talking about the NFL, who plays all their division opponents twice, or whether you're talking about college basketball, where in a lot of cases you play teams twice, or you may play a team in the conference tournament at the end of the year that you, of course, played in the regular season, or you then, of course, you've got the 64-team tournament where the chance always exists that you could have a rematch against somebody. But in college football, that's been sort of something we're just not used to seeing. So I think something we got to get more used to. And the second thing I want to mention about just rematches in general off the top here, before I get into the game, is this talking point that floats around every time a rematch comes up that goes, it's hard to beat a team twice. I don't really think it is. I think it's hard to beat a good team. Whether you're talking once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, whatever. What I mean is these two teams have already played, okay? And Virginia handled them. And it wasn't a thing where it was in the beginning of the season and now these two teams are totally different. These two teams played 2 weeks ago, and Virginia beat them 34-17. Do we think that means that by itself means that it's going to be hard for Virginia to beat Duke? Virginia blew Duke out 2 weeks ago. It's going to be hard for them to beat them again. I disagree with that. I think it's hard to beat good teams. Once, twice, 3 times, whatever. Let me give you just another hypothetical type of situation here. You take a look at a schedule like Ohio State. That came out wrong. I didn't mean that. Nothing wrong with their schedule. Ohio State beat Wisconsin 34-0. I'm just picking a random game off Ohio State's schedule. Ohio State beat Wisconsin 34-0. You think it would be hard for Ohio State to beat Wisconsin again? No. No. Ohio State is probably the best team in the country. Wisconsin's one of the worst. Those two teams could play 10 times. I'm pretty sure Ohio State would win 10 out of 10. I'd pick them to win 10 out of 10. So, no, it would not be hard for Ohio State to beat Wisconsin a second time because Wisconsin's not a good team. Now, take Ohio State and Indiana, which we'll talk more about in a minute. Is it going to be hard for Ohio State to beat Indiana? Probably, right? Indiana's a good team. So if Ohio State beats Indiana Saturday and then they play again in the postseason, would it be hard for Ohio State to beat Indiana again? Yeah, because Indiana's still a good team when they play again. So to me, it's hard to beat a good team. It's not hard to just randomly beat a team twice. That I don't buy into. If a team is a lot better than the other team, no, it's not hard to beat them twice. And to get back to the ACC, to me, that's the point here. I just don't think Duke's anywhere near as good as Virginia. Look, and the ACC is what it is. I don't want to turn this ACC conference championship game prediction into bashing the ACC. The ACC is what it is. Virginia's not a top 10 team. They're not even a top 15 team. Do they have a chance to make the playoffs? Yes, because of automatic qualifiers. But Virginia's not some kind of juggernaut team, but they're clearly better than Duke. With Duke, we're talking about a 7-5 team here who lost to they lost 3 non-con games. They lost to Illinois and 2 group of 5 teams, and then 2 conference games. Virginia, to me, is just a clearly better team than Duke. Now, that doesn't mean that Duke can't beat them. This is why we play the games and don't just skip the games and say, well, this team's favored, so they would win. It doesn't matter. You don't have to play the game type of thing. So is there a scenario out there where Duke finds a way to win this game? Yeah, I think, they got a good head coach. I like Manny Diaz. I think he's proven that he's a pretty good head coach. I think he was okay at Miami. Don't necessarily blame Miami for moving on from him because they had a chance to get Mario Cristobal and they felt that was an upgrade. But it wasn't a situation where Manny Diaz got fired from Miami because he was winning 3 games a year. I mean, he had decent seasons down there, became defensive coordinator up at Penn State. Now he's at Duke. And he's got him in the conference championship game here in year 2. Now they're 7-5 again. I'm not trying to convince anybody they're some kind of great team, but if they can get good play from the quarterback, which has been a key to you look at their wins, he's played well in those games. So yeah, there's a scenario out there where Duke beats Virginia, right? Again, Virginia not necessarily one of the 5 or 10 most dominant teams in the country on anybody's list, but I think Virginia is clearly the better team here. Doubled them up just 2 weeks ago, 34-17. And there's a lot on the line here for Virginia. They got everything to play for. Duke, it's pretty widely acknowledged that even if Duke wins this game, Duke will not get in the playoffs because they would be behind the winner of North Texas and Tulane, and then probably behind James Madison, who plays in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game on Friday. They're going to finish the season most likely 12-1 with a conference title. They would most likely finish higher than Duke, even if Duke beats Virginia. Whereas Virginia, on the other hand, is going to make the playoffs if they find a way to win this game. So for motivation point of view, if you're a conspiracy theorist out there who thinks that sometimes these games are rigged, I don't buy into that, but there's a lot of people that do. If you buy into that, then this is the type of game where the ACC, the referees, whatever it is, y'all conspiracy people like to point at, would say, well, the ACC is going to make sure Virginia wins this game, or the refs are going to make sure Virginia wins this game so that the ACC gets a guaranteed team into the playoffs. I don't buy into that. I just think Virginia's the much better team here. I think they're going to get the win. I don't think it'll be particularly close. I'm a little bit surprised at the line in this game, especially considering these two teams played just 2 weeks ago. Virginia's only favored by 4. Again, it's not like they played in September and you're looking at different versions of these teams now. These are pretty much the same teams that played a couple of weeks ago when Virginia beat them 34-17. They're only favored by 4. It started at about 2.5 and got bet up to 4. So a lot of money coming in on Virginia. I think Virginia gets the win here. I think Virginia wins the ACC and punches their ticket to the college football playoff. All right, now that brings us to the Big Ten championship game, Indiana and Ohio State. The only 2 teams to go 12-0. Indiana and Ohio State, both undefeated regular seasons. Indiana, of course, got a big win on the road at Oregon. Ohio State got a much-needed win over Michigan at the end of the year. And both of these teams, these are legitimately the top 2 teams in the country, I think. Especially if you want to talk about rankings or whatever, there's no debate in my mind. These 2 teams deserve to be ranked 1 and 2. They've looked really, really good. Ohio State is probably the most impressive roster in all of college football. Indiana has looked like the most dominant team week in and week out to me in all of college football, even more dominant than Ohio State. Now, I think some of this with Ohio State has been boredom, honestly. In a lot of their games, they are just so much better from a talent point of view than the teams that they're playing almost every single week, that you get yourself into a situation where you're kind of like a dog playing with his food or whatever, especially in the second half of a lot of these Ohio State games. And let's be honest here, Ohio State is a blue blood program. They're used to being, here in the top 5. They don't really play for regular season wins. All of their goals occur in the month of December and beyond. Not that Indiana doesn't have goals beyond regular season and even conference championships. They do, and they should. They're a legitimate top 5 team who could win it all, in my opinion. They're sort of new to the party. It's still exciting when you look down and see that Indiana beat somebody 56-3. So they have just absolutely just dominated the overwhelming majority of teams that they've played this year. I mean, when you go through and you look at some of these scores with Indiana, and I'm not going to break it down by first half and second half, but in a lot of these games are over 2 and 3 minutes into the second quarter. But just some of the scores here: 56-9, 73-0, 63-10, 38-13, 56-6, 55-10, 31-7, 56-3. They had a couple of, I guess, close calls, at least relatively speaking. A 27-14 against Old Dominion way back in week 1. 20-15 was their most difficult game on the road at Iowa. Oregon, they beat by 10 on the road in Oregon, 30-10. By the way, they played Iowa and Oregon in back-to-back games. So impressive road wins there. 27-24 in that wild game at Penn State. But for the most part, they have absolutely destroyed everybody they have played. And I don't blame them. Again, it is what it is. They're a really good team. So you want to talk about like who's looked the most dominant. It's probably Indiana. These are two quarterbacks who are on everybody's Heisman list with Julian Sayin and Mendoza. And I think both will have good games here in the Big Ten championship game as well. I know Ohio State's got a really good defense, probably the best defense in college football. They're only giving up about 8 points a game, I think it is. Very stingy, hard to move the ball in Ohio State. But I feel like this Indiana offense in Mendoza is going to be able to move the ball and score some points. Of course, Ohio State can do the same. They are just loaded at skill positions. Where you talk a wide receiver, running back, they've got a great offensive line. There's really no obvious weakness here when you look at the roster for Ohio State. As far as like who might want this win more, who might need this win more, who does this game mean more to, sort of feels like Indiana, right? Ohio State has won this game a bunch of times, a ton of times. And last year, they didn't even play in this game and still went on to win the national title. Indiana, they're still sort of the new kid on the block here. There's a lot of talk going around the world of college football right now about these conference championship games and how much they matter, how important they are. Do these teams even want to play in these games? And while there's arguments to be made on both sides of that debate, I guarantee you to a person, every single player, every single coach, and every single fan associated with Indiana not only wants to be in this game and play in this game, but wants to win this game. And probably the overwhelming majority of Ohio State coaches, players, and fans would feel the same way. These are still important games. The only way that you can look at a conference championship game and have the opinion that, oh, this game doesn't matter or this game doesn't mean anything. Because, of course, the reasoning being both of these teams are going to the playoffs, so what does this game matter? Even the losers getting in. Unless you think all that matters in college football is the playoffs and a national title, I mean, Indiana would love to have a Big Ten championship in 2025. Wouldn't they? And you can say the same for every team playing for a conference championship. I mean, I get the sort of the goal of winning a national title. I get that. But anytime you have a goal, like your long-term goal at the beginning of the season, we want to win the national title, right? And you could even apply this to yourself, whatever goals you might have for yourself in life, whether it be work or whatever. You have a long-term goal. And then part of hitting that long-term goal, part of the plan in terms of hitting that long-term goal is you set short-term goals for yourself along the way. I can't imagine right now there being a team in college football who at the start of the season doesn't have somewhere on their list of goals to make and win the conference championship game. So I still think it's a big deal to play in these games and to win them. I think Indiana, I think, would definitely agree. I think Ohio State's better than Indiana. I think Ohio State's better than anybody they play. I think they're the most talented team in the country. They deserve the number one ranking. I feel like they're probably going to be favored against everybody they play, not just in this game, but moving forward. But we talked about it earlier. This is why you play the game. The most talented team doesn't always win. The favored team doesn't always win. And again, it's not like this is a 20-point spread. They're favored by 3 or 4 points, depending on where you look here. And I think they're going to get Indiana's best effort. I don't think this is a situation where you've got teams rolling into this game thinking, well, we'll just kind of go get this thing over with and then start preparing for the playoffs. I think Indiana's showing up to win this game. The other thing that concerns me from the Ohio State side of things here is how important to them the Michigan game was. And I'm not going to use the overplayed phrase of it being their Super Bowl. That clearly was not Ohio State's Super Bowl. You're talking about a team that won the national title last year and has a goal to do it again this year. But beating Michigan was very important to Ohio State. The seniors on Ohio State's team had never beaten Michigan. Ryan Day has not beaten them since 2019. The fans obviously had it up to here with losing to Michigan. So a lot went into that Michigan game for Ohio State. A lot emotionally, obviously a lot physically, with that being a physical game along the line of scrimmage like it is every single year. Whereas Indiana was busy coasting to another 50-point win against a terrible, I think it was Purdue. They played in the last week of the regular season. Let me click here and just make sure real quick. You told me I was fake news. Yeah. They played at Purdue, one of the worst teams, not just in the Big Ten, but on the planet. They were 2-10 this year. So, while Ohio State is having to sort of exert all their effort and energy, not that they blew Michigan out. They were way better. But that game took a lot out of them emotionally, psychologically, right? Physically along the lines of scrimmage. While Indiana's over here beating up lowly Purdue, resting their starters in the second half in a lot of cases, right? So now they got to turn around this week and play the Big Ten championship game against Indiana in a game where I feel like it just means more to Indiana than it does Ohio State. So I think that is an edge for Indiana. I just don't know that I can pick Ohio State to lose a game until I see them lose. They lost that Michigan game last year. They haven't lost a game since. They breezed through the playoffs, beating 4 top 10 teams in a row to win a national title. All 4 of those games were pretty dominant, even if the scoreboard didn't necessarily reflect it. There wasn't a game Ohio State played in the playoffs last year where it wasn't obvious Ohio State was the better team. They looked really, really good. And they've picked up right where they left off last year this season, starting in week 1 with that win over Texas at home. They've rolled through the regular season, finishing with the big win against Michigan, and now they're getting ready to make another playoff run, win or lose here. And while I think that Indiana is definitely capable of beating Ohio State, I don't think this is last year's Indiana team. My view on Indiana last year has been clear and consistent the whole time, going back to a year ago. I do think Indiana deserved to be in the playoffs last year based on the fact that they were a Big Ten team that went 11-1. They deserved to be in. I also thought in the very beginning there was no way they were winning any games once they got there. They were a good team. They were, somewhere between the 10th and 15th best team in the country probably last year. That deserved to be in the playoffs. I also felt like they didn't stand a chance on the road in the first round against Notre Dame or whoever they ended up playing, and that bared true. I don't think that's the case with this year's Indiana. I think this year's Indiana believes in themselves, which is important. And if you've watched them play, you can talk to me up to you're blue in the face about their schedule and who they played and who they didn't play and whatever. I've watched them play 7 or 8 games. They're legit. They're going to be a problem for anybody they play. And look, Ohio State might beat them by 3 touchdowns. That won't change my opinion of Indiana one bit. I promise you this. Now, whether they'll admit it or not, I don't know. But you talk to a fan of any team that's getting ready to head to the playoffs in a couple of weeks and ask them if they want to play Indiana in the first round. If they say they're not worried at all about Indiana, they're lying to themselves. Indiana is legit and can win some playoff games this year, regardless of what happens here in this Big Ten championship game. But I can't pick against Ohio State right now until I see them lose a game. It's been over a calendar year now since they've lost. They're clearly the most talented roster in football. The wide receiver situation, I know everybody talks about it all the time. It's almost, we've almost gotten numb, I think, to how good Ohio State's wide receiver room is. It's unbelievably good. Jeremiah Smith gets all the headlines, but Carnell Tate would be a number 1 on almost any team in the country. Ennis would be a number 1 on over half the teams in the country. Their tight end would start at almost any team in the country. And I can't even tell you who their 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th wide receivers are that are probably true freshmen or sophomores, but I can promise you half of them are going to be playing in the NFL eventually. These guys will move on, and those guys will become starters next year, and they'll be NFL receivers too. They're just absolutely loaded. Absolutely loaded. The freshman running back, Bo Jackson, has been a bright spot for Ohio State this year. That was really their biggest question mark in my mind heading into the season because they lost 2 high-level NFL running backs last year to the draft. Who's going to replace that? Well, we found out. It's Bo Jackson. They play 2 or 3 different running backs, but Bo Jackson, the freshman, has been really good. They just come at you in waves and in so many different directions. And you can game plan all you want to shut Jeremiah Smith down. That's great. We've seen teams do that. Texas did it twice to Ohio State last year in the playoffs and week 1 this year. That's fine. We'll just throw it to Carnell Tate and the tight end all day long, and there's nothing you can do about it. I got to see somebody beat Ohio State, and the defense is just ridiculous. Matt Patricia came in to replace Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator, and they hadn't missed a beat. In fact, they might even be better. I think they are better defensively than they were last year. So I got to go with Ohio State to win this one. I do think it'll be a close game, and because the spread is over a field goal, I'm going to take Indiana in the points, 4.5, 5 points, whatever I can get. I think it'll be a close game, but I don't see anybody beating Ohio State. So there you go. That's those 3 games out of the way. Give me North Texas over Tulane, Virginia over Duke, and Ohio State over Indiana in those 3 conference championship games. I'll talk about the SEC and the Big 12 in another video later on. But I appreciate you watching. Make sure you subscribe if you're new around here. I do this every single day, college football 365 days a year. Have a good morning.